Well, the most important thing, Alex, for people to recognize is that far from the happy, bliss-inducing, joy-inducing neurotransmitter hormone substance that serotonin is portrayed to be by the mainstream media and by mainstream medical professionals, it turns out that serotonin is a hormone of vigilance. It's a hormone of awareness. It's a hormone that's designed to keep us on our toes, so to speak. It's a daytime hormone that's designed to keep us able to handle the ups and downs and the vicissitudes of day-to-day life. So when you start to monkey around with the serotonin system, what you're monkeying around with is the awareness system, and the end result of too much serotonin is hyper-awareness, hyper-vigilance, paranoia, and this sense that this hyper-focused sense that people have when they're freaking out.
Artificial schizophrenia.
It's like a type of schizophrenia. In fact, LSD is very similar to serotonin. And
it's in the same class.
Same class, basically the same substance. Basically, it's the same molecule. And if you want to know what the effects of too much serotonin are, the kind of effects that you get when you start to manipulate the serotonin clearing system, which is how these SSRI drugs are, think of the last time you saw somebody on some kind of LSD trip. LSD was actually researched, was discovered when they were researching ways to manipulate this serotonin system. So serotonin is a drug, a neurotransmitter that is involved with the vigilance response. Now, you obviously need to have this vigilance response, but you've got to be very, very careful with it. In addition, serotonin is largely produced by stress cells in the digestive system. Your digestive system is always on the alert for poisons and for toxins, and you have these stress cells, cells that are literally similar to adrenal cells, that produce serotonin just waiting for you to eat some kind of poison or some kind of toxin. So
is that why Prozac is linked to diabetes?
Prozac is linked to diabetes because for other reasons. We can get into that in a moment. That's a very important point. But that's why Prozac is used as an appetite suppressant. Prozac and serotonin has an effect on the digestive system that is much bigger than the effect that it has on the brain. In fact, 90% plus of the serotonin in your body is actually produced by these stress cells in the digestive system. So this feeling of butterflies in your stomach, the feeling of nervousness that you have before you have a date or you have stage fright, these are all serotonin mediated. They are the alert response that's produced by serotonin in these digestive stress cells. In the brain, serotonin is involved in the wakefulness response. And if you want to know what serotonin really does, think about melatonin, which is the exact opposite of serotonin. And we all know that when you take melatonin, you feel groggy, you feel sleepy, you feel relaxed. Well, serotonin does the exact opposite. Melatonin is the antagonistic.
All right, we got to go to break, but from my research, because you're the big pharmacist and the expert, but what other experts have told me, after you've been on these drugs a while, though, it burns you out, then they put you usually on more, then you're in a hyper-awake form of sleep. You're in a dream state or daydreaming state, but hyper-awake, having a hallucination.
Well, hyper-awake is one component of serotonin, but its real role is to help you handle shock and help you handle stress. So one of the mechanisms for handling stress is hyper-awareness, but another one is withdrawal. Another one is getting away from the situation. Another one is becoming numbed out. So these are all mechanisms that the body has for dealing with overwhelm, for dealing with stress, for dealing with some kind of shock. And this is what serotonin is, and that's why you never want to play around with this system, especially considering, by the way, Alex, that people suffer from serotonin depletion for lifestyle reasons, for reasons of choice. They suffer from serotonin depletion from too much sugar, for one. They suffer from serotonin depletion from not enough sun. Well, the point about the sun is we're convinced, we're bamboozled to believe that the sun is some kind of demon in the sky that's hell-bent on our destruction, when the fact of the matter is that through substances like serotonin, the sun is an anabolic substance, anabolic stimulus. It turns on growth. It turns on building. It's much the same with cholesterol. Cholesterol is the same way. It turns on growth. It turns on building. So via these messages that we get through the media and through mainstream physicians and the medical model for staying out of the sun and using cholesterol-lowering drugs and not eating cholesterol, we're almost like we're being systematically destroyed. Humanity is being crushed. And here's another very important point that nobody talks about. Serotonin regulates something called learnt helplessness. And learned helplessness is a phenomena where you just learn to feel helpless. You learn like you don't have any control over your life. You learn like you have no control over your decision making. Well, guess what, folks? Serotonin regulates this feeling of learned helplessness, and playing around with your serotonin levels, artificially manipulating your serotonin levels, increases the likelihood of this sensation of learned helplessness. And to me, this is one of the most insidious features of these SSRI drugs, and could very well be linked to the feelings of rage and violent behavior. I want people on SSRIs to understand this: the chemical imbalance theory of depression. The idea that depression is caused by a lack of serotonin and that you build your serotonin, you're not depressed. Number one, it's simplistic and naive. And number two, it's never been shown to be the case. In fact, drugs that block serotonin have been shown to have antidepressant activity just as well as drugs that increase serotonin. So please do not be fooled by the simplistic idea that all you do is raise your serotonin levels and you're not depressed anymore. That is drug company propaganda. That is marketing and advertising information that has never been shown to be the case. That's first of all. What has been shown to be the case is that elevations in serotonin, super high levels of serotonin, such as the kind that are caused by artificially manipulating the serotonin system, are associated with agitation, with restlessness, with diarrhea, with hallucinations, with fast heartbeat. Serotonin itself, the very word serotonin, means sero for blood, tonin for tightening. That's because serotonin's classic effect is blood clotting and hypertension. Let me say that again. Serotonin's classic effect on the body is blood clotting and hypertension, and it's in the very name serotonin. Now, blood clotting and hypertension are two iconic signs of the body's stress response. And given the fact that 80 million or more Americans are hypertensive, and some of the best-selling drugs on the planet are blood-thinning drugs and among the most toxic drugs. So clearly blood clotting and hypertension are big problems in this country. It seems to me that anybody who's considering taking a drug that would manipulate serotonin levels, that would up serotonin levels, that would increase the amount of this neurotransmitter that's associated with blood clotting and hypertension, would want to think twice, especially considering that this chemical imbalance theory has never been shown to be the case. Now, what we do know is that serotonin is a hormone of awareness, it's a hormone of vigilance, it is a summertime hormone, it is a daytime hormone. It is associated with the sun and it's associated with light, which is why the best way to get your serotonin is to make sure you're getting some sunlight. And not only that, take your sunglasses off and make sure you're looking at the sun.
Absolutely.
The rays from the sun, the photonic energy from the sun will go through your eyes, it'll go into your brain, and it will help upregulate serotonin production. In addition, Alex, as you mentioned, there's wonderful, wonderful nutritional strategies that you can use to upregulate your serotonin system. Earlier we talked about how digestive stress cells, they're called enterochromaffin cells, are the largest producers of serotonin in the body. One of the best ways that you can make sure that your serotonin system is running cleanly is to eliminate problem foods, number one, and that means any kind of foods that the body will perceive as a toxin. That is processed foods, that is things like excitotoxins, MSG for example, artificial flavors. And secondly, make sure you're addressing something called H. pylori. And H. pylori is a bacteria that overgrows in the digestive tract as we get older and as our digestive system becomes more compromised, as our acid production in our digestive system in our stomach starts to become compromised. This bacteria overgrows, and that is a big-time stressor on the serotonin system, the digestive serotonin system. So addressing your digestive system by clearing out H. pylori using things like apple cider vinegar, for example, digestive enzymes, for example, probiotics, unbelievably important for supporting digestive health and supporting the serotonin, the digestive serotonin system. It's a big problem, and there's an important relationship between sugar intake and serotonin. When you eat sugar, this is perceived biochemically by the body as a major stress. Sugar is very, very explosive stuff. If you ever put a marshmallow in a fire and you see the marshmallow go poof, you can see how explosive sugar is. Well, in the body, that same kind of explosivity, that same kind of explosive reaction occurs. And so when you eat sugar, especially fast-burning sugars, dessert kinds of sugars, soda pop kinds of sugars, the body's stress response is triggered, and this stress response involves serotonin. In fact, the hormone insulin and the hormone serotonin work hand in hand. And today we have a big problem. Maybe the biggest health crisis of all is something called insulin resistance, and this is when the body stops listening to insulin, and going hand in hand with insulin resistance is serotonin resistance. And just like insulin resistance will keep the body from listening to insulin, serotonin resistance will keep the body from listening to serotonin. Of course, then you're going to go to the doctor, and he's going to give you an SSRI drug, and when all you really need to do is reset this insulin system by reducing your intake of fast-burning sugars.
It's very dangerous to go off the serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and we have a report here we're going to show people in a moment. What would you do if you were, say, a 35-year-old man or woman who's been on psychotropics for, say, 6 years? They've got you on 3 of them because, quote, the others didn't work, and you don't know who you are anymore, and you know, you're kind of eating a regular McDonald's diet. What would be just the brief process that Ben Fuchs, and again, my dad's a dentist oral surgeon, the people he respects more than anybody aren't even doctors and people, it's pharmacists, because he knows, especially longtime master pharmacist, you guys kill people if you make a mistake. And so you guys really went to school to actually know what the drugs do, you know, I don't know, 20, 30 times what doctors do. So I mean, that's why you're the guy to talk to on this. What are the dangers of going off the serotonin reuptake inhibitors or other antipsychotic classes?
Well, first of all, we have to understand how serotonin reuptake inhibitors work. When the brain secretes serotonin, it immediately sucks that serotonin back up again. So serotonin will get released, and then it will get uptaken, reuptaken. It'll get sucked up back up again into the nerves so that it doesn't have too much of an effect. This is called reuptake, and it's a standard process that occurs in the body or in the brain.
It inhibits
reuptake. Exactly. Reuptake inhibitors inhibit that process, so the serotonin stays in the system. It
creates a chemical imbalance.
A major chemical imbalance. That serotonin is artificially kept active. So you get off your serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and because this uptake mechanism has been shut down, now you got all of this serotonin reuptake, all of this serotonin that has left the nerve cells, you run into a major, major risk of serotonin depletion, because the serotonin is not getting taken up back into the cells. So you want to make sure, if you're going to get off of serotonin reuptake inhibitors, that you wean yourself off of them very slowly, and you build your serotonin levels back up. Violence and paranoia are part of the hypervigilant response. Vigilance is important, you know, you got to be aware, but this hypervigilant response is akin to paranoia. What we call paranoia can be defined as hypervigilance. When you start messing around with serotonin, pharmacologically manipulating its levels, keeping serotonin activity high artificially, you run the risk of this kind of paranoia hypervigilance, which is where rage comes from and rageful behavior comes from. You can't mess around with your brain chemistry artificially and not expect to create problems. And this whole idea of chemical imbalance manipulating the brain, Alex, do you think there's a test for serotonin? Do you think you go to a psychiatrist and he does a test to see how high your serotonin levels are?
They just put you on a quack drug.
They just give them to you. They just give them to you. That's exactly right. They give them to you like they're M&Ms or like they're candy. That's how they do. That's how they used to cure depression. They would hack your brain out, or electroconvulsive therapy, where they shock you into being happy. This is the history of psychiatry. But Alex, the question is why are we complicit? Why do we participate? Why do we listen to anything they tell us? When, like you say, the information is right there in plain sight, perhaps hidden in plain sight, but it's in plain sight. I sent you a stack of information. It took me all of 15 or 20 minutes to gather that information. It's everywhere. The fact of the matter is, if you do your research, you will see